In this video, we're going to talk about Amazon Web Services Identity and Access Management, commonly called IAM. We'll discuss what IAM is, the benefits that IAM provides to companies, the components that make up IAM, and how those components tie together into an easy-to-use system for access into Amazon Web Services. IAM is the part of Amazon Web Services that helps you securely manage access. You can create users and groups, as well as permissions policies that allow or deny access to various AWS resources. You can also create IAM roles, which are similar to users and groups and also control access to AWS resources, but IAM roles are actually attached to other AWS resources, such as EC2 instances, Lambda functions, and more. IAM consists of several components. Those components are users, groups, policies, and roles. IAM users are accounts, often for individuals to use that want to access the AWS resources in your account. You can create users and assign them to groups. A common pattern is to also create least privileged IAM users for applications to use. This is called creating a service account. Whenever you create a service account, you're often doing this so the application can access AWS resources as well. This might be something like a backend web service wanting access to an S3 bucket so that it can write files to that S3 bucket. IAM groups are collections of IAM users. You can grant permissions to a group, and then you can attach multiple IAM users to that group, and all the IAM users in that group will get those same permissions. You can also attach an IAM user to multiple IAM groups, and that user will get the permissions of each IAM group they're a part of. IAM roles are similar to IAM users, but they're for applications and services that are running in AWS. You can assign permissions to an IAM role, and any application or service that is using that role will have those permissions. For example, you can create an IAM role that allows files to be written to an S3 bucket. Then attach that IAM role to a Lambda function. And every time that Lambda function runs, it'll be able to write files to that S3 bucket specified. IAM policies are documents that define permissions for users, groups, and roles. IAM policies are written in JSON and can provide access or deny access to AWS resources. IAM policies can be attached to users, groups, and roles in one of two ways. There is a one-to-one attachment called an inline attachment, and that is where you attach an IAM policy to one user or group or role, and that IAM policy can't be reused for other groups and roles and users. Or you can create a separate standalone IAM policy called a customer managed IAM policy, and that customer managed IAM policy can be attached to any number of users, groups, or roles. Now, the final piece that I want to talk about are access keys. Access keys consist of a access key ID and a secret access key. IAM users, when they first are created, typically don't have any access keys. And access keys are used to authenticate an IAM user. And an IAM user can have at most 2 access keys. Access keys don't provide permissions on their own, but they're only used to authenticate an IAM user. Access keys cannot be tied to a group or a role. Let's tie it all together with an illustrated example. Let's imagine that we're running an application on our laptop that wants to have the ability to write files to an S3 bucket. How we would go about doing that is we would create an IAM policy document that says, here's the permissions to write files to this bucket. Now, what we need to do is then create an IAM user and maybe an IAM group. And if we create an IAM group, we would take the IAM policy and attach it to the group and then add the IAM user to that group. We would also create an access key for that IAM user and then get the access key ID and the secret access key and hand them over to the application running on the laptop. And then that application, whenever it runs, it would be able to use that access key to authenticate as the IAM user, get the permissions from the policy, and be able to write files to that S3 bucket. All right, now that we've covered all the major components of AWS Identity and Access Management, otherwise known as IAM, stick around for the next video where we actually put this all into practice